Hello and welcome to our February 2022 update here at Revesby Estates Farm. February, well, it's been a bit of a wild month. We've had 58.2 mil of rain. Now there is an old saying that February is known as February fill dyke, and that's certainly what we have had. So we are pretty much at field capacity now, as we call it, on the land, which is where it can't hold any more water, so it's like a sponge. It takes up a certain amount of water, but then when that gets full, the rest of it is then running out through the drains and into the ditches and away. So we are now at that level, but we are also getting to the point of the year where the crops will start to grow and actually suck that moisture out of the ground anyway. So it's not too bad, and we actually want them reserves filled up to allow these crops to grow well during the spring. But we've also had some very high winds coming through. So this month in general, we haven't made much progress as such on the actual farm land. The oilseed rape had its first dose of nitrogen to get it up and growing, because we've been getting attacked by the pigeons quite a lot. So to try and get that to compensate and put some leaf area on, it's had its first small amount of nitrogen. But other than that, there's been no land work taken place, because it's just not been fit to be on the land. But the lads have been busy out there with the storms, clearing up fallen trees. We're very lucky we haven't had any down on the roadsides, but we do road side surveys on the trees, so we get them assessed for any dangerous trees which might be there, and that certainly pays off when we get these storms through. We don't get so many limbs down on the roads, but we have to clear up, but we have some around the fields, and they've been busy clearing them up. That wood will get recycled though. It will come back through and be used in our log production system, and that is mainly what, again, the lads have been busy with on the farm, is keeping up with orders on the firewood. So when I'm putting these videos together, I always do like it if people send in questions, because then I can target what we're talking about to subjects which you would actually like to know, and keep it interesting rather than just me talking about what we're doing and it's maybe not of as such interest. So we've actually had a question in from Arthur. Now Arthur's not local, Arthur is all the way up in Tyneham Weir, so yes, our newsletter does reach far and wide. So Arthur would like to know, what role does the extra CO2 play in crop development, and is there a point where excess CO2 would be a problem? As I understand, previous ploughing released unwanted CO2 into the environment. So this is relating on to my video last month where we was looking in the cover crops, and I was talking about the CO2 being held and then cultivations releasing it. So, well, Arthur, I'll do my best to see if we can answer your question. We've come now to help answer Arthur's question into our last actual cover crop field here. All the rest have now been grazed by sheep and just this final one to go. So as we're in here, I've just put the spade in the ground. We'll dig a spit out of the soil to hopefully try and explain CO2 and how it's working within the soil. So the plant, as it's growing, absorbs the CO2 in through its leaves, and then it's using that as its energy. It's transforming it and being used for the new shoots, for the new growth. It's the carbon element, carbon being the building block of all life. But as well as just going into the growth part of the plant as well, it's actually exchanging through its roots. So it's sequestering, we call it, carbon down through its roots and out to the microbes what are in the soil. It's doing this in the forms of sugar. So as it puts out the carbon into the soil as forms of sugar, all the microbes and fungi and bacteria within the soil will feed on that exudate from the roots, and in turn they will feed nutrition back into the plant. So it's a two-way relationship. The plant is putting the CO2, the carbon in forms of sugar, into the soil, where the microbes then take it and use it for life themselves. And in exchange, they're giving nutrition back to the plant, which it's which it's needing to form part of its building block as well. So that's one way it's using the CO2 within the soil. And then obviously there's the residues. As we see in this soil here, on the top is the residue from our last previous crop, which in here was a crop of winter wheat. So you can see all the straws in here. This is also carbon. This is humus left in here, which is a sink of carbon supply within it. Now, what we want with this is the microbes will break this down slowly. If the soil is left undisturbed like it is at the moment, there's a balance of water and air and nutrition within this soil, and it finds its own natural balance, and that is great. This will break down slowly over time as it feeds on it. And what we get is from the build-up, we now call it organic matter. It's vital to the soil, because the more organic matter we can get in here, it holds the soil open. It puts a lot more pockets within the soil, just very micro pockets in the soil, and we can hold on to water more. So it will increase the water holding capacity of this soil, which is great when we get into the dry springs. So when we get into May and June and it's hot and burning hot and we're running out of moisture, in a soil which has held more organic matter, we are holding on to more moisture, more water as well. So these crops can keep on growing through it. So there isn't actually a problem with having too much CO2, or in this form carbon, within the soil. The problem can come from the fact that because we're not tilling this land, we're leaving it as it is, and all this trash, as you can see on the top, we're relying on the earthworms now to pull this down throughout the profile of the soil. What you can potentially get is a build-up of nutrition within this zone, and then below it, if you haven't got the earthworms working for you, you're not transferring that down. So some people may say you then need to plough it to rotate this nutrition down and then let the top build back up again. But over time, building up the organisms, building up the fungi, building up the worms actually do decompose this and will pull it down throughout the soil for us as well. Now, the other good thing about the carbon within the soil and the buildup of earthworms and such like is we don't get what we call surface runoff. So as you can see here, just by having the crop on it will slow the water down. Surface runoff is when it rains and the water hits the ground, but then it's either compacted from machinery running over it, or even the action of the rain can compact it, and then we get runoff. And that runoff can just take water, can carry soil straight into our drains, and that is bad news, because we can then get eutrophication of our waterways, because the one thing our waterways need from that is phosphate. Now, phosphate does not leach through soil, it's heavily bound on to the clay particles here. But if this soil was to wash down over the surface and into the waterways, we then put that phosphate into the waterways. So by doing it this way, keeping a cover on it, keeping the organisms in the soil working well, we allow the rain to hit the ground and then percolate through the soil and get held nicely within here, and we're not getting soil runoff into the waterways. So Arthur, you mentioned about having the plough. So all the plough is really doing is takes this soil, and then we would literally turn it upside down, and then we get the fresh start again. What you've done there, if like that big hole in there, in rushes the oxygen. Just like a fire, when you put more oxygen into it, it burns more intensely, burns all that energy off. And that's exactly what happens with the plough in this soil. So the plough will come in, turn it over, expose such a large area to the air now, more oxygen goes in there. The microbes, the bugs go crazy because they've got more oxygen, and they actually then start feeding on all this organic matter, what is within here, and then transpire. They will release then through their natural respiration the CO2 back into the atmosphere, and that is the bad news point. We want to keep that CO2 locked in this soil. That carbon is locked into this soil. You can see it all in here, all these root hairs, all of these elements within here. But that would all disappear as soon as this was open with the plough and the extra oxygen in. Wham! Off it goes up into the atmosphere. Now it's estimated it can be anywhere up to 3 tons of CO2 is released by the plough from this soil is it was to pass through, and that's a massive amount into the atmosphere. And again, talking about global warming and such like, by ploughing, if all farmers were to continue ploughing, it could be 15 to 20% of CO2 released into the air could actually come from this mechanism. So by not ploughing, we are keeping that trapped in this soil. We want to increase the organic matter levels. By increasing the organic matter levels, we're increasing the air pockets within the soil. The roots can get down through it better. There is more healthier bacteria in there, exchanging the nutrition to the crop. And in general, it's what we call soil health, really. It just improves the soil health. So we don't want to release it. So hopefully, after you can see, by ploughing, we're not releasing unwanted CO2. None of it is unwanted. We want to trap as much CO2 as we can from the atmosphere and hold it within the soil in the form of carbon. That is what we're trying to do, and that is why here at Revesby we actually don't plough. We plough after sugar beet because of the damage which is done to the soil. It's the easiest way to correct it, but we're growing less and less of that, and we are now 92% direct drill, so straight into this soil with the drill. Minimal disturbance done. It's a bit like, you could look at it as keyhole surgery, leaving everything undisturbed and just going into where it's needed, in which point we can keep all this carbon locked in it. The crops are sucking more and more CO2 all the time, which in effect is creating us a healthier soil. And in doing so, the nutrient balance gets better within this soil as well. We see a lot of manganese deficiencies within our soil, but now we're getting better root mass. The roots can explore the soil better exchange with all the organisms within the soil, and we're not seeing the manganese deficiencies like we used to do. I'm hoping that kind of makes some sense on what we do with the CO2 out of the atmosphere, converting it into sugars and trapping it in the soil, and such like the debris left behind from the dying crops is the carbon. How we use that, trap it, hold it within the soil, and we don't get a problem with excess carbon in the soil. We want more carbon. We want to build our organic matter levels. We've actually sampled all the organic matter levels we've on the farm. We know where they are, and we are trying to increase them, because then that makes the land work easier for us, more healthier for us, and it has such big benefits for the environment around us. So yes, the plough's not used, it's not releasing unwanted carbon, because every single bit of carbon is wanted. So yes, any more questions, please do send them in and I will do my best to answer them. Okay, thank you.